afternoon. This is Corey Young with TigerPaw Software. Welcome to the webinar today. Chris Devaney will be your presenter today. Chris is a CPA and is the Division Director for TigerTrack. They're a company specializing in software evolution and process analysis. Chris has over 25 years of experience engaging with companies in various service and integration verticals in order to improve both their operational efficiencies and analysis. As a certified implementer of TigerPaw, Chris has been involved with hundreds of engagements with our user family over the past 15 years. I want to thank Chris for presenting today, and just remind people to, on your right panel, if you have questions or want to join in chat, go ahead and engage us there, and we'll get those answered as soon as possible. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Corey. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, while we're waiting for our the start list, we'll give you a little movie theme in the advance here. I'm going to give you a little opening credits here, except for exciting coming attractions. Usually they're better in the movie that follows. Hopefully the same is not true today. During the session today, I want you to try and shut everything out, the emails, the voicemails, and the texts, whatever you have going on. Not because I'm going to say something life-changing, but because I really want you to think about your business. We all need to sit back at times and reevaluate the process streams of our companies. Our hectic pace does not allow us to do that very often, unfortunately. So the title of this presentation is called The Ultimate Way to Capture Billable Revenue While Monitoring and Controlling Costs. That's quite the mouthful. I'm going to boil it down to this: straight line processing. As Corey said, I have been working with TigerPaw for about 17 years at this point in time. Prior to that, I've worked as a CFO for companies, and I was also in public accounting, a partner at a regional CPA firm. So I've had experience in a lot of industries, and all along the service arena: HVAC, interconnects, AV, you name it, anything they service, I probably worked with it over the years, along with a number of manufacturing companies, auto dealers, cemeteries, all across the board. So mainly what the TigerPaw customers is going to serve as the basis for his presentation today. Now I'm going to give you a quick example of someone who did not think about their business in life. I asked you guys to sit down and think about their business. I was out on an engagement a number of years ago, and when I come out on an engagement, I usually will sit down with the customer and try and learn a little bit about their business, trying to understand their process flows. One particular customer, we were discussing invoicing and service order approval. They had, if it wasn't 10, it might have been 15 people who had to approve a service order, slightly exaggerating, but not by much. So when a service order got complete, it was bouncing from desk to desk to desk. So I really started asking each party, well, what are you doing with that invoice or that service order? What do you do to approve it? What are you looking at? The majority of the room, with the exception of about 2 of them, never even looked at it. It just sat on their desk till someone came in and said, hey, are you done looking at that service order? So all of our companies sit down and have, if we ever were to sit down and look at our processes, we would find a number of legacy flows in the organization. So my big thoughts for you today is ask why. Why am I doing something? Again, so try and shut things out in this presentation and just kind of concentrate. If you want to shut me out, that's fine too, but take some time just to think about what is happening in your business. Now, I just mentioned a party's name here, so I kind of put this little disclaimer out there. So had someone come up to me after a conference at one point in time and said, oh, I know the guy you're talking about. Well, the guy I was talking about had been dead for about 15 years, so they really didn't. So just in case anyone is believing this is resembling them or someone they know, it's not, okay? So with CFOs, and that's what most of the attendees here today are, we sometimes tend to focus on cost cutting. Cost cutting does not just mean reducing item costs such as workers' comp costs, real estate tax costs, payroll tax costs. It means squeezing out inefficiencies. Think of the wasted effort at Sherry's company I just gave you the example of. How much time was spent just going through invoices or going through service orders for approval and just wasted time in billing? That's money. It's bad enough trying to get customers to pay for product these days, let alone delaying your billing process by a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, simply because you have some kind of a screwball process that someone worked on 10, 15 years ago. Now, the employee view of the CFO. So again, there's a lot of CFOs in this session today. How does the rest of the company usually view the CFO? Usually they're the aforementioned cost counter. They're the bean counter. They're easily replaced. They're all the same. And sometimes we play into that typecasting. At times we can be too cautious. Our love of order can trap us. It can paralyze us from making changes needed in our organization. Everything is not a trap. Any change is not a trap. We have that tendency, and mostly the most unsuccessful CSOs, not successful, the unsuccessful CFOs I've met over the years, want no part of any other area of the company. They prefer simply to control their own world. Now, a lot of times accountants are, we all love our control of things. We love to have that general ledger balance, the debit and the credits balance. But if you're going to do an effective job for your company, you need to reach beyond that. Now, unfortunately, what we're seeing here is the view that some CFOs have of the rest of the company. The sales staff, it's out partying and running up expenses that we have to write checks for and pay. Service techs, they're just trying to pull product out of inventory and view any kind of internal controls as a hassle. We suspect purchasing is getting incentives to buy product, and well, we know how we view ourselves as the heroes of the organization. Let's be honest. Now, to be successful as a company and as a CFO, we need to move beyond these views. Realize that the work of others impacts ours. We need to have visibility into the sales, purchasing, and service processes to ensure that what we are reporting is correct, to ensure the company's success. That's why I will always advocate the unitary approach, and we're going to try and improve that during our talk today. But if it's going to happen in the company, it needs to start with the CFO. You really need to be the agent of change in your organization. Now, you're going to ask yourselves, well, why does that have to start with me? I'm just the CFO. I balance the books. But most likely, as a CFO, you have probably been involved in more businesses, whether it has been in public accounting or other jobs. You're going to have the insights into the company that others do not, because everything flows through you. We've been trained, most of us in a CFO role have probably come from a public accounting arena, and you're trained in public accounting to listen, to observe, to question, and overview. First thing I ever do when I come into an organization, I always ask for a tour of that organization. Sometimes just for me to get the lay of the land. You want to know where the bathroom is sometimes. But it's also for me to take a look at the employees in that company, and I can kind of gauge their personalities. You know who the relenters are going to be, the people who are going to fight you. You know who the assenters are going to be, the guys who are really going to be all on board. They're excited about adding a PSA to the system, adding Tiger Paw. And you're also going to have those people who are just going to pretend that they're going to go along with you. So they are going to be parties that you need to kind of deal with to get this thing going. There's going to be the yes men. Yeah, this is going to be great. So we want to work on that, and that's why we have learned those skills. So it's something you need to do in your own organization as well. So as you said, there's going to be some relenters in the organization who are going to be vested interest that want to resist that change. Just like sometimes we don't want to open up the gates to our fiefdom. Heaven forbid someone was going to look at our general ledger or want to write a check or want to see some kind of a report. You're going to have people who want to do that. The service managers are going to say, well, why does the CFO want to know what's going on in service? Mind your own business. We need to kind of get around that. We need to use some of the skills we've learned over the years, and we all need to kind of put into play some of our psychological skills or psychology skills to go through and negotiate with these parties to make this a successful change. Now, I mentioned to you that we'll be making change in the organization. We're going to start off on a strange jumping spot for that. It started with a long drive I had in the car a while back. And as I said to you, as Corey mentioned and I mentioned, I do a lot of training for Tiger Paw. Sometimes that involves time behind the wheel. So you know what happens when you're on a long drive. Usually I have a rule of thumb. If it's over 6 hours, I fly. Under 6 hours, 7 hours, I will usually drive to the customer. So that's a lot of time, especially in traffic. I live in the Northeast. There's a lot of traffic here. So you sit. What are you doing? You sit in the car. You listen to the radio. You listen to sports talk. You listen to music. You listen to news. And after a while, you move to silence. So at some point in time, on one of these trips recently, I had went to some silence. I was kind of thinking. And for whatever reason, I started thinking about my dad. Now, my dad was a man who loved the barbecue. He used to burn the food like awful stuff. I'm not sure. We didn't love when he barbecued, but he loved the barbecue. Now, he was a time and motion study engineer. So a lot of times, while we're waiting for our food, he would be discussing his project. So what he would do is he would head into manufacturing plants, and he would try and eliminate wasted motion in the company to try and speed up the manufacturing process. And he did that all over the country, did that all over the world, in fact. So I was thinking of my dad, and that kind of got me thinking about those conversations that he had, because I figured, I'm kind of doing the same thing in my own life, but I'm doing it a different way. So in my thought, we're all manufacturers, whether we are manufacturing a product or a service. Manufacturing involves building something. What are we building? We're building service for our customer. Take a look at the service flow. Looks very similar to what we just looked at on the manufacturing flow. You're moving from a prospect to a quote, to a service order, to an invoice. And what do we just look at on the manufacturing end? materials, assemble, output product, and satisfy customer. So we're certainly simplifying the manufacturing process a little bit, not discussing any lost materials, and we're also simplifying the service process a bit. We're not talking about lost customers and lost prospects either. But the basic flow, which I'm trying to indicate, is very, very similar. We are a nation and a world of manufacturers. We just don't view it that way sometimes. Now, manufacturing and service have also evolved in very similar ways. How did manufacturing start? Small craftsmen making product. The system worked, but capacity was very limited. How much different is your manual system of tracking leads and service calls? What I would like to call the service craftsman. They're utilizing that whiteboard to write down that the system is down at the customer. Now, manufacturing in the 1800s and early 1900s, Eli Whitney contributed the idea of interchangeable parts, which greatly enhanced productivity, but a better way was still needed. Just like using a disparate system for service is more involved than a manual system, there is still a better way. Now, when I mean a disparate system, I mean you have a separate package for inventory, separate one for lead tracking, for agreements, employee time, quoting, service, purchasing, and accounting. Everything is separate. Now, the manufacturing world changed around 1910. That's when Henry Ford and Charles Sorensen introduced a modern assembly line at the Highland Park plant. This reduced chassis assembly of the Ford Model T from 12 hours to less than 3. What a huge change that is. What was for Ford, what a huge change it was for the world. Now, this is one of my favorite quotes from Henry Ford. Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. That really sums up Ford's philosophy. Now, his principle of, another one of his principles, his principle of assembly was this. Place the tools and men in a sequence of operations so that each component part shall travel the least possible distance while in the process of finishing. What my dad did for a living. What I do when I work with Tiger Paw customers. So very similar patterns between the two. They mirror each other very greatly. So that was the contribution of Ford, the assembly line. Now, there are some people who had kind of worked on it slightly before. Ford's really the modern father of it, in my view. Now, there was an answer to that in our world, but it came a little bit later. So the service world now has its view. It is professional services automation. That's our way of improving. So this is exactly what Ford was seeking for his world. A PSA connects the organization and allows for the collectivity of operation. So let's take a little bit what that means. So what do you do in your organization? You ignite interest by marketing. You engage during the selling process, and you quote the customer. We accept the signed quote. We fulfill by installing. We earn through invoicing. We procure by providing good ongoing service, all in one straight line. Nothing is lost. Hence my term earlier, straight line processing. So ideally, using your PSA, everything's going to be in one package, a straight line from intake of that suspect all the way down the line and the life stream and life cycle of that account. So let's take a little bit slower look at this. We ignite interest by marketing. We engage during the selling process. We accept the signed quote. We fulfill by installing. We earn through invoicing. We procure by providing good ongoing service. So just like there were some theories of manufacturing, lean manufacturing, theories of constraints, things my dad used to talk to me when I was waiting for his hamburger to come out. So some of those have stuck in my head over the years. There's also have been theories of service. Now, this is my theory of service, so mine will very likely not be as enduring as what Henry Ford's is. I hope it will be. But my theory is the 3 R's, meaning that your service needs to be repeatable, reliable, and reportable. So any package you are working with needs to help foster that. If it's not, then you need to find something different in your organization to make this so. When I say the 3 R's, repeatable, can we locate strangers? Can we explain what makes us different? Can we convert that stranger into a prospect, into a customer, into an ongoing account for 5, 10, 15 years? Can we be reliable? Can we obtain and control material? Can we provide good service? Can we bill and collect quickly? Reportable, can we determine how profitable we have been? Can we determine where that profit came from and where it went to? Can we make decisions off our financial statements? If you can't make a decision off your financial statements, they're not worth a hill of beans. They may be worth filing a tax return, but they're not going to help you manage your business. Now, I want to illustrate why this straight line approach to businesses works through a couple of examples, because some parties don't agree with that. I met this fellow John at a conference a while back that I was speaking at, and John used a manual system. And for him, man, that was the best way to go. You couldn't tell him anything otherwise. He used a whiteboard, the old classic pre-numbered service orders, which are going to give him all the control. If Kenny doesn't turn back service order number 1,000, damn it, I know I'm going to go through and I'm going to find out what happened with that 1,000. So he would have that for service orders, Outlook for contacts, and QuickBooks. And he said, of course, he has no inventory. So I had some questions for John, kind of running him through what I view in my process as the methodology for reviewing success. Was his business repeatable? So I asked him, John, are your earnings repeatable? You have a lead, you go out to a customer site. Well, where did that lead come from? Do you have a billboard? Oh, sure, I have a billboard. I have it out on a major interstate. Do you know how many people call you on that? You speak at conferences. You may have all the answers that the companies need to hear. Are they calling you because of that? How many of those leads that you're getting from the billboard, from the speaking, from whatever newspaper ads, well, how many of those do you actually lose? Leave out of the mix that how many you actually got. How many have you lost because your salespeople aren't turning that lead, aren't converting it? One sale is great, but you really need to know also how you lose them. So how can you repeat your success, I asked John, if you do not know what succeeded in the first place? Didn't really have an answer. These are the kind of things that John needs to know in his business. So if we look at our sales staff, we have strangers out there, right? I consider a stranger. Some people call them suspects. Someone told me before that a suspect sounded criminal, so I changed that to stranger a number of years ago. So this salesperson has a backlog with a short production time, so he's pretty ideal. He's converting. He's getting his strangers in the door, and he's moving them on to a prospect. These folks here had a little bit longer production time, but they still have a pretty good backlog. Next one here has a pretty healthy backlog, but maybe too much of a healthy backlog. Maybe he may need a little assistance in getting that customer converted. You don't want to leave them ahead, or that stranger converted. You don't want to leave that stranger out there too long, because that stranger is going to meet someone else and move on down the line. This one here has a little backlog and a long time in turning them, so that salesperson is starting to run dry. And as you can see here, what percent of those strangers have become opportunities? Likely, one of these lines has completely dropped off. It went from 3 down to 4. Likely it was the one with that long production time as far as converting his strangers into prospects. That's likely the one that dropped off. Prospect conversion. How many of those prospects that have been moved from the suspect to the prospect have been successfully converted to an opportunity? Not you actually got the chance to convert them into monitoring prospect, into managed services, into hosted PBX, and into AV inspection. If your system's not telling you this right now, it's something you need to look into. How many of these prospects do you actually ultimately convert into a sale? 20, 42, 75, what is it? So if you can see that and drill that down to an individual sales rep, you can find out what their magic is. Why is that sales rep working and not the other one? Maybe you would fire the guy who's only converting 20% of them, but maybe as a manager you're better served to salvage that employee and let him share or work with the person who is at the 75% and share those tips and tricks through the rest of the organization. Because there's one thing I usually like organizations to look at, and that is a lead conversion rate. Couldn't ask for more simple math, and it's a very important math, but it's not going to work, and you can't calculate it if you don't have the information, if you can't track that. John couldn't track that in his business. Now, he mentioned that John was out there doing some quotes for his customers, and this would probably be the look of one of John's service contracts or service agreements, contract, and installation sale. He would have typed it in Word. It has little scope of work on it, and it has even less detail on parts, terms and conditions. Well, I have no idea what those are. And what kind of impression are you making to your customer? What kind of impression are you making for your staff? Is it going to be enough for your staff to be able to convert that order into being successfully and be reliably fulfilled? Because you can maybe be the greatest sales organization under the sun, but if you are not reliable, all is pointless. That customer is not going to come back to you. Then you may get that one sale out of them, but you're going to be a churn and burn organization, and you're going to be likely out of business. We've all run into them. You see those people come into town, and they're doing gangbuster business, and you wonder what happens 2 and 3 years later. They're gone because they did horrific service. Now I asked John, did you ever forget to order equipment? No, of course not. Well, how could he not have forgot to order equipment? He had a paper system for doing everything. One piece of paper gets lost, he leaves it in his truck. Someone does something with his whiteboard, that information gets lost. How is he fulfilling equipment? How does your staff know what to order? How much time is wasted in determining that? Are they going back and, well, John, where's that Excel spreadsheet you gave the customer? Oh, I left it on the server. Oh, it's on my laptop. I'll bring it in with you tomorrow. So another day gets wasted. I've been around companies that do this. So another day, and you sit in the place while it's going on. Another day, another hour, another 2 hours passes by where you can't get the order in. Are you ordering too much equipment? Are people just saying, oh, we need to do this install because John couldn't get the paperwork to go ahead and order 10 more phones than what they need that are just going to sit on the shelf till some customer needs them 6 months from now, where you could have had 6 months of that cash flow? Have you ever lost paperwork? Now, John said he had that wonderful pre-numbered form, so he never lost any paperwork. How much time spent tracking that? And, of course, I was certainly skeptical of John's proof. Now, I did work at auto dealers. I remember going to auto dealers, they would have missing RMA reports in the system, or missing RA, repair authorizations, pardon me. They had missing RA reports, and some of these things would sit out there for months. So now John's got to remember, spend the time keeping a log as to which person had this gap of service orders, has to track of any void that you might have. You asked your tech, oh, what happened to that? Oh, I lost it. You had that pre-numbered system. That also is rife for fraud. Ran across a place where the guy went out and had a printing company produce a service order without numbers on it, or the fake number on it. So the customer thought all looked legit. This guy was getting a little bit of payment on the side from the customer. It was enough volume on there that it worked out for him, where he could get away with it for quite a long time. So the whiteboard method, which is what John was using, very simple method. Couldn't be simpler, couldn't be easier, and John swore by it. It was an awesome, awesome, awesome system. Now that system is great until your grandkids come in or your own kids come in and they decide to play a little bit of tic-tac-toe on your whiteboard. What happens? The information's gone. May not be a service order, it could be your opportunities, it could be any leads you're meeting, anything else. I mean, whiteboards are awesome, but they're great for a meeting, not great for long-term storage of information. I was actually at one place where they used to take a picture of their whiteboard with their phone. And I guess that's a poor man's view of data backup, but not the best way to run your business. Because what happens when someone erases that whiteboard? You end up with a whole new method for tracking your customers' needs. I like to call it the angry customer method. Now, if you're using a PSA, what do you have? A listing of all your open service orders. Cost list by service order number for all statuses, for all service order types. So here, this is a report. This is not designed to be a demo of TigerPaw, but what it is to give you a little idea of a package that can give you information that can tell you what your open service orders are. If you don't have that right now, if you are using a whiteboard system, it may be something you would like to take a look at. Does your time get paid, I asked John. Do you match at the time worked? Oh, of course it does. Well, what are you doing to prove that out? Can it be done? Well, sure, it can be done, but it's going to be very laborious. Again, if you're taking that straight line approach, your employees are entering their time either through a web portal or someone's keying a timesheet. I would certainly not advocate keying a timesheet, but it's better than what John's system was. They'd be keying the timesheet into, in this example, TigerPaw. Those hours would already be on the service order. So whatever hours on the service order is what you're going to bill the customer. Unless you're going to be completely, well, I'll say incompetent and ignore how many hours were used on there, you're going to see exactly how many hours were used, and you can make sure that you billed what you were supposed to bill. And in fact, if you didn't, you could run a report in the system and see how many hours were spent versus how many hours were billed. How much simpler is that? Remember what we were saying earlier? Reportability. Time logs. As we mentioned earlier, by putting the technician's hours and getting them in the system, you may run time log reports out of the system. So time logs are now serving two purposes. They're getting your employees paid, and they're also now getting the hours to pay, or pardon me, to bill to your customer. They should not be a disjointed function whatsoever. They need to go hand in hand. Now, you may choose, because Barbara maybe spent too much time working in Speaker Enterprises, maybe 4 hours of work was too much, or maybe it should have been 3. You can adjust those hours down, but at least you know how many hours Barbara worked. You're not guessing, oh, this job should have taken 5. Well, maybe it took longer. Maybe your guess was wrong. Maybe your estimates are wrong on the sales end. So maybe you have great salespeople, but they're just estimating incorrectly. You can't tell that if everyone's not playing in the same field. Billable time logs not converted. How many hours do you have out there that were not billed yet? How many hours are trapped? How much revenue is trapped in your system? Estimated versus actual hours, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. So you're going to have your hours out on the job. I was working with one customer a while back and said, well, how's your year going? Man, it's really bad, really, really bad. So I said, do me a favor, let's run your estimated versus actual hours report. And sure enough, every job they had virtually in the system was over hours. And it came out in the course of the discussion, yeah, we've had to sell things at a much closer margin, very competitive environment I'm at right now. And that's what's helping us get sales. Well, it's helping you get sales, but sometimes some of those sales might not have been worth making. Now, it could be a management decision to go ahead and do that just to keep you guys busy. You don't want to lay someone off. Can certainly understand that. But at least you need to have the ability, not just to say, having a bad month, having a bad year, you need to be able to drill down and find out why. Do you ever have a problem with customers not paying, I asked John. Yeah, it happens sometimes, and sometimes these orders kind of keep building up. Well, my question to him was, why isn't that nipped in the bud? Because they weren't putting anyone on credit hold. In a good system, you should be able to put that customer on hold and block them from getting service. Maybe you don't want to choose to go to that extreme a level, but what you can certainly do is you could stop them from getting that call in with give them a little talk. Hey, Kenny's coming out to do the service. Can you give him a check when he comes out? Or what's the reason for this is so slow? It at least puts the idea in front of the customer's head and maybe says, wow, this is the last time I'm going to be getting that service. Not saying you have to cut the person off, but at least gives you the ability to do so. Quick report you can run out of the system. Also can pop up in, again, this isn't designed to be a product demo, but that's what can also pop up in TigerPaw when you're placing the service request. So you put that order in, boom, pops up right in front of their face and says, wow, this customer's on credit hold. It stops that customer. It stops from adding salt in the wound because that guy who hasn't paid you 15 times now is not going to pay you the 16th time possibly. So they are stopped in their tracks. And this is the aforementioned screen pop that will happen. Now, as I said earlier, as part of my 3 R's, reportability is key. So in my view, if you can't report it, if you can't say it, it didn't happen. In John's case, nothing happened because John would do maintenance contracts for customers, and you'd ask him, hey, you profitable in that customer? Should you be doing that for $1,000 a month, or should it be $6,000 a month? And this guy's calling you till the cows come home every day. John said his contracts were profitable. Couldn't prove it. I can prove it in a matter of seconds. And you should be able to prove it as well. How much revenue are you earning on your contracts? Now, again, certainly talk to your accountants about this, but in my view, when you are booking your maintenance contracts, they should be recognized over the course of the year. How much of that revenue, again, depending on whether you're cash basis or accrual, how much of that revenue have you earned? How much of it is still deferred? Because you bill a customer on December 31st, and it's a $24,000 contract, $2,000 a month. Do you want that back in 2015, or do you want to recognize that revenue in 2016 when you are servicing that customer? So again, talk to your accountants about that. Whatever their decision, certainly go with it. They'll steer you the right way. But you want to be able to at least have that information to see what you haven't earned yet if they decide, yeah, we should go that way, or no, you don't need to go that way. At least you have the information at your hands. Now, at some point in time, John said he was thinking about selling his business. Well, at a minimum, what does John need? Active customer list. Because he could go through QuickBooks and look at that, or whatever his accounting system won. Accounts under contract, might have a memorized contract or memorized transaction list if he was using QuickBooks or some other package. Contract profitability, that wasn't happening. Technician utilization, that wasn't happening. Inventory detail report, that wasn't happening because John said he had no inventory, but he did have some inventory, I believe. And detailed financial statements, that very likely wasn't happening either. So did John meet any of these, any of the above? Was he repeatable? Could he locate the strangers? John had no clue where his customers were coming from, where his leads were coming from. So he couldn't really do much of these at all. The exception of profitability, he could probably determine his profitability at the end of the year, and maybe he could figure out where it was coming from and going to in QuickBooks with a lot of effort if they were doing the billing. But why not do that up front? Why not do that when the service order is being put in? Do it by your service order type. It's going to be a Mac job. And so you want to know where your Mac materials are going to go to a certain spot in your general ledger versus Mac labor versus Mac non-stock items in your system. Now I ran into another party. So we had mentioned our example. We have the manual system that went as far as the manufacturing, also in the service world. We also have the classic disparate system, as we showed earlier in that diagram early on. Now I met a fellow by the name of Tony. Now Tony thought he was super technical. So that's kind of why I picked this slide for him. So Tony said, man, I am so technical in my business. I'm really a high-tech company, and I run my business high-tech. Now, was Tony really that high-tech? He was using some pretty good disparate systems. Now, he's going to come a lot closer than what John did in his business. But where is Tony going to be left hanging? He thought he had all the bases covered. Tony had no relay of information. At best, it was time-consuming. At worst case, his information never got through. Tony had a classic case of no connection. No connection between his inventory, his leads, his accounting agreements. Everything was just going back and forth through a very manual, despite the fact that he was using computer-based and web-based systems, I'll still say a manual-based process. Every department was an island. Every department was in charge of its own software and controlling the data flow. That's not productive, it's not efficient, and it's not successful. Tell you a little story of what that reminds me of when I hear that. When I was in college, I worked the night shift in a local supermarket chain here. And when I first started, I was listening to our assistant manager in the back room one day, and very loud, very little on the grumpy side, the best way of saying it. And he was in the back there saying, I'm tired of doing this blooming, and I wasn't using the word blooming, this blooming Steven Gerrard work. You know, I'd hear that all day long. So I was thinking to myself, who the heck is Steven Gerrard? I thought I had met everyone in the store. I thought maybe he was like an outside manager, a district manager. So finally I asked someone, I said, who the heck is Steven Gerrard? Well, Steven Gerrard, pardon my ignorance, I was a 16-year-old kid, so I didn't know the story. Steven Gerrard was a financier and philanthropist back here in Philadelphia. During an economic downturn, he paid citizens to move rocks from one end of the lot to another. He believed no good came from idle hands. Can't argue that. It's probably a pretty good philosophy. So back locally here, at least as colloquialism, it's defined as a task or an occupation comprised of make work or busy work, a repetitive undertaking. That reminded me exactly of Tony's system. Anytime I go to any customer who has that, that is clearly what leaps to my mind. So I had some questions for Tony, and I have these same questions for anyone if I'm ever working on a demo for someone or if I'm actually out on site doing the implementation, because some parties will resist getting implemented. Now, how many meetings do you have simply to transfer information back and forth? Anytime I sit in a meeting, I kind of envision what you're seeing right there, a clock sitting on a table, and you're just watching the day pass away. You're watching minutes pass away. Because everyone around the table's got to tell that joke. They got to talk about, you know, who traded for what draft pick, or how did the game go last night, or what's going to happen this week, what's going to happen in the upcoming election. And all of a sudden, that 15-minute meeting you're supposed to have, and that quick 5-minute meeting turns into a half-hour or an hour meeting. Happens constantly. Meetings can be super useful, but when they're burning time, they're not really useful. Now, I had another customer I'd gone to where their solution for the disparate system was this incredible system of colored folders. Man, these guys had every colored folder under the sun. They must have gone to the folder manufacturer and asked them for different colors. Because I'm telling you, I never saw so many different color folders, but in all the office supply stores, I've never seen anything like it since. But they used to have a different folder for any suspect that they had going on, or stranger, depending on what terminology you want to use. Any prospect, quote, job specs, purchase for the job, timesheets for the jobs, billing for the jobs, and a whole host of other ones. So what we actually did for that customer is we actually got rid of all of those colored folders and got them into TigerPaw. Now, my next question for Tony was, are all your transactions being reflected? Well, you might as well be playing this slot, in my view, and working with a disparate system, because it's just not worth the risk of something not going all the way through. And it very easily can happen. Seen it happen. I'm sure you guys have probably seen it happen if you're using a disparate system right now in your own companies. There's a very high probability of something getting missed, unless you have incredible controls. Again, even if you do have those incredible controls, let's go back to one of the earliest slides I had in the presentation thus far. How many hours are you spending doing those controls? So what is that control costing you? What's the cause and benefit of that control? Now, we can have so many different directions for something to go in. They're not going to go to the proper endpoint. No matter how good your controls are, something is going to slip somewhere along the line. Now, how long does it take you right now to build your reports? The assembly versus the transfer. And what's going to happen? At some point in time, something is going to spill. Could that spill be a $1,000 job? Could it be a $15,000 job? Could it be a series of $100 jobs that simply add up that you're just missing repetitively? Could it be a service order that doesn't get service for a customer and you lose the maintenance contract? That's not a unitary approach to running your business. Now, this is a little report here. I promise this wouldn't be a product demo a couple times so far. Now, this is not a product demo, it's just an excerpt of a report that we've written for TigerPaw that we use every day in our company. It is we call it the Daily Flash Report, harkening back to my public accounting days where I used to work with some manufacturing companies. They had a report that they would run every day for a Daily Flash Report, lost units in production, what the backlog would be for orders. So this report here is sent every day to management in our company, giving you a breakdown of everything that happened in the organization. So we're saying to Tony, had a little bit of that data flow. We had the image of buckets, one bucket flowing into another and worrying about possible spillage and how long it would take you to build reports. Well, I can run this report in about 5 seconds. Tell me how many service orders I did yesterday, how many service orders were closed, invoice voided, invoices created, accounts created, quotes received, opportunities generated, how much inventory I have, how many POs I generated, all in 5 seconds. A unitary approach. Think of the power of that as a CFO in your organization, as the president of your company, to get a full bird's eye of everything that's happening in the organization. You need to know this if you're the CFO. If you're not, in my view, you're not doing as good a job as you could be. You may have your books balanced to the T, but if you can't get this visibility of seeing the aging of your service orders and how many hours are being logged, how many hours have not been billed yet, you're not doing yourself, you're doing your company a disservice and potentially your customer a disservice if you're an outside consultant on this call. Now, Tony had some of the same problems that John had in his own business. Lost paperwork and billing of service orders. Tony had to make sure that order moved from one system to the other. Servicing overdue customers. That wasn't going to be recorded because the system wasn't connected. Contract profitability. Automated billing and payment. Maybe he could have done that in a system. An example, I don't think he could, but maybe he could have done that. Tracking earned contract revenue. Not very likely because you don't know who didn't pay the bill. And going forth, time approval and timesheet integration, inventory control, divisional reporting, because there wasn't enough visibility into the other departments because each department controlled its own data flow, which caused problems for the accounting department. This is a little bit of a visual representation of Tony's processes. Maybe it's going to make its way through the maze, maybe it won't, but as I said earlier, how much time is spent getting through the maze? That adds up, folks. That adds up to a lot of hours. Now, with a PSA, it breaks down the walls of that maze. Everything is moving in a straight line. What a PSA means, it means connection. Everything flows one to the other, from prospect to customer, customer to quote, quote to service order to invoice, everything in one spot. Is that $100 invoice that your accounting department is trying to collect from a customer, is that worth jeopardizing a $100,000 quote because they get a little too aggressive in collecting that money? Because they weren't aware of it. They could look in the system to see what kind of quotes were outstanding because you don't have that connectivity. You're not working collectively in your organization. How does the accounting department know otherwise? Knowledge and visibility is the key to success in your organization. Everyone needs to be playing out of the same sandbox, playing on the same field, whatever term you want to use. The PSA means moving in straight lines from prospect to customer to invoice and moving before that from the suspect. Everything needs to keep moving down the line. Moving in straight lines. You're always moving forward. Remember, repeatable, reliable, reportable. The process can continue over and over if being done the correct way. Man, this is a peaceful view. You feel like sitting on the side of this little hill here and watching that river flow by. Well, that's what moving in straight lines can mean. It means moving smooth and easy data transfer from one department to the other. Unitary reporting is now possible with little effort. There's no buckets involved. Nothing gets spilled, and you can just sit back on there and watch that data flow. It's like going out there right now and just watching that little piece. That piece can be yours in your organization if you're either not using your PSA appropriately or you don't have a PSA in your business right now. Because there's going to be a wide variety of people in the session right now doing that. The PSA gives you the 3 R's. You can take my goofy 3 R terminology I came up with, Come up with your 3 Qs, S's, T's, or Z's, whatever works for you, but as long as you're meeting the crux of what we're talking about here. Now, I have some questions to ask you, well, actually for you to ask yourself. We're not unmuting the call. We can at the end if you guys wish. So these are questions I want you to ask yourself. First of all, who are you? Are you John with a manual system who thinks that's the best? Who are you Tony, who thinks his disparate system is the way to go because he's just so blooming high tech? Which are you? Are you somewhere in between? Do you need to be somewhere further along the line? Or are you using the PSA right now and all you ever added in was the service module? There's a lot more to do in life, a lot more to take advantage of. Can you bill quickly? Are your technicians out in the field moving through the process of getting that service order, closing their ticket, entering their parts used, their hours worked, getting a signature from the customer? How long does that take to get back? Are you waiting for someone to come back in with their van? Chris is going to be back in tomorrow morning to this ticket. I'll get it billed then. That's a day of time, and maybe Chris gets called on an emergency. Maybe it moves to 2 days at a time or 3 days at a time to he's called on an install. How much time is being spent? How much time is being added to your collection process simply because you're not billing fast enough? Let alone your customer's not paying the bills and then coming in for a service request, and you guys just keep going out and service them, adding insult to injury. Have your service orders been billed and paid? How quickly can you tell? How long does it take for you to find out whether you billed it? How long does it take for you to find out right now in your system that you've been paid? I can look right now and see service orders that aren't completely invoiced by running a quick report. And I don't even need to go that far. I don't need to run a report. Visibility is key. I can see right on the service order right here, fully invoiced, fully posted without running any report whatsoever. And there's a whole host of other areas. Again, I said it's not a product demo of TigerPaw. That Corey and his team can certainly show you that when need be, but there's an awesome reporting tool in TigerPaw called the Matrix. We can do things even more important than just running a report. So that's something I would love to have them be able to show you. You don't need to run that report to find out whether the service order was paid, an invoice was paid. I can look right at the service order level, key to the invoice, without maybe having the rights to open the invoice up, but I can at least see whether the invoice was paid or not. That's all I really need to see at times. I don't need, accountants sometimes get worried, oh my gosh, the service guys are going to see the invoice. That means they're doing accounting. I don't want them doing that. Well, you can lock that down. They don't have to view the invoice. They don't have to be able to print the invoice out. They can at least see that the service order was paid. That's what the key thing is. What's going to happen otherwise? They got to send an email to you. Hey, has Kenny paid invoice number 8913? You got to take time spending an email back, or heaven forbid they come out and talk to you. Then you start talking about the NFL draft, or you start talking about the baseball game that happened last night, or the hockey playoffs, whatever's going on. Wasted time, wasted effort. It adds up in an organization. You need to wring those things out. Do you have revenue trapped because of inefficient service? I had said earlier that you're going to have some service managers who are going to say, what the heck are you getting involved in service for? You know nothing about it. You couldn't fix a phone system. You can barely dial your own phone. Well, that may be the case. Maybe you can't dial your own phone, but you can certainly look out there and say, why do I have all these old age service orders out there? Are we not servicing the customers? Have these orders been closed 3 months ago? You just haven't gotten the paperwork in? What's happening? If you're just sitting there happily whistling your tune inside the general ledger saying, man, boss, my books are all balanced, everything balanced out, I got a schedule in my desk drawer for this, got a schedule for that, got a great spreadsheet, the tax returns are done, the sales tax returns are done. That's great, but how much revenue has been trapped inside your system that hasn't been billed to your customers? You can do so much more. Are you billing everything? For people on the call, it might be a managed service provider. Do you know what agreements you have out there, when they've ended, when they were last billed? How many accounts do you have under agreement? Are you pulling assets to generate billing, or are you just relying on a very, very manual process? Someone to go into QuickBooks say, QuickBooks is an awesome program, I'm not trying to knock it, where you're just going into QuickBooks manually and putting a manual memorized transaction, you have to edit it every month. Those things can happen for you automatically. Automated billing and payment. Can an automated bill be done? So now we're getting completely rid of even generating the bill. You're pulling the asset, you're generating it, and you're eliminating collection times as being drawn out of it as an ACH or a credit card each month. Can you view what has been purchased for a job? How quickly can you tell? I can view immediately the purchase order detail for a service order in a report. I can look right in the system and see what has been purchased, what has been received for this job, and who is my primary vendor on that. How old is your inventory? Is it worth what you think? This is a report that we've written for Tiger Paw. It's a reserved inventory allocation report, giving us an idea of how much on-hand quantity and how much has been allocated to us. So we can look at certain product that we know is slow moving, and we see, wow, we have, an incredible amount of our inventory being allocated versus on-hand versus reserved. So we have all this reserved quantity out there, meaning it's been filled, it's been allocated to a job, and we have 825 on hand. Well, wouldn't I want to have maybe 90, 95% of that allocated? I don't want to see 7% of it. Why do I have only 7% of product out there? Why do I have the rest of that product? Maybe the answer is you got a big job coming up or you need it for a certain customer in an emergency. All right, but at least allow you to answer that question of the purchasing department. If you didn't have access to that software, you couldn't ask that question. Inventory turnover report. Can you run an inventory turnover report? Do you have access to that? Or are you simply waiting for the purchasing manager or the inventory manager to give you the inventory evaluation each month? And you say, okay, great, thanks. Where you can sit there and kind of query that party. Again, as a CFO, that's your role. That's your role to learn what's working in your organization, and maybe you don't have the authority to enforce anything if things go wrong. You can at least take it to management and say, wow, I'm seeing some odd trends in inventory turnover. Inventory evaluation report. How frequently can you check at that? How accurate is the inventory? You may not be an expert at it, but you can at least see how old some of these products are, looking other ways, and say, wow, is this product still worth what is valued? I look at that report all the time in our company. Do you ever have that poor bottom line some months? You don't have them. You're going to get that slow month. Some people have them more frequent than others, unfortunately. But who has to figure out what caused it? Can you figure it out? Now, I'm a big fan of what I like to call the fulfillment-based profit and loss statement. A good PSA can facilitate that. Tiger Paw works very well at facilitating that. I'm not going to show you how because it's not a product demo, but it works very well in facilitating that and getting you a breakout of where your revenue is coming from. Again, I'm not saying fulfillment-based is an installation. Is it a move, add, and change? Is it service? Am I doing cabling labor? Am I doing install labor? Some parties are breaking it out between new sales, new customers, existing customers, essentially to prove, have I become a sales organization only, where I have to go out there and get new customers every month. I got to churn and burn. I got to keep getting that new sale. I want to have a happy balance between that new sale and also my existing. So maybe your other thing is I'm getting all my business simply from existing customers in my business, and I'm not getting any new sales. How long could you keep pumping that well? At some point in time, that well is going to go dry. Employee time. Is it correct? Do you have an approval-based system where someone can approve those time logs and question the hours? Timesheet integration. Are you manually entering time, or are you allowing your technicians to enter their time in the field? Now we're going to bring this in for a landing here, because we're kind of coming up against our hour. I could probably go on for multiple hours unless I had to kind of move quickly, but I could talk all day about this at the times I have. So in kind of summing up, what you really need here is you need connection in your business. Inventory needs to connect to accounting. Leads need to connect to accounting. Agreements, quoting, service, purchasing. Everything that Tony did not have in his business, and clearly what John did not have in his business. Now, I don't want you to look at this and some people get very upset. Man, I should have been doing this years ago in my business. I'm a dope. There's an old Chinese proverb that I remember, and what it was is that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So the only shame you would have right now in not doing this is in not beginning, is in not trying to give yourself a unitary approach, and is not to try and adopt straight line processing. Because if you don't have these things covered in your systems right now, I will wager that you are losing revenue, you're losing customers, and your business is not as profitable or successful as it should be. Maybe you guys are that story that you're a diamond in the rough where it's not going to be because you are so good and you have such great personnel that you can handle this. But I hope you're that, but I would certainly hope you're not the other side of it. Now, Corey, I'm going to move to the other slide. I don't know if you want to take over at this point in time.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay.
So Chris is showing you a screen here for those that have attended today. We have a special running on Tiger Paw software where if you purchase 4 of each core module, you'll receive all of our add-on products for free with a free year of mobile. So if you're interested in moving forward with that deal, please contact us at sales@tigerpaw.com. And as Chris mentioned, that automating your processes from beginning to end is what Tiger Paw does. and we can accomplish all the things that Chris talked about today with TigerPaw software.
Yeah, and the key
Chris,
for us is going to be, yeah, Corey, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to go on this title here. Chris and TigerTrack is a great partner of ours, and I hope as you engage TigerPaw, you would reach out to Chris as well. So go ahead and talk about the slide if you would like.
Well, so here's my contact information, and what I was going to say is that, if anyone wants to see this functionality, certainly in a demo process, that you can be walked through exactly what I'm talking through in this straight line processing. This wasn't designed to be a product demo. It was designed to really just kind of give you the concepts of what we're talking about. Corey and his awesome team can walk you through the process to show you how TigerPaw can do that for your business. Because what we want is that straight line processing. It's kind of another final view here of what you want to have in your business, and if you don't have that, it's something I would strongly recommend looking into.
We'll be sending out a recording to everybody that attended. You should be seeing an email on that sometime tomorrow. So I'm going to thank everybody for attending, and thank you, Chris, for presenting.
Oh, thank you, Corey, for the invite. I appreciate it. Take care, folks. Thank you for coming today.